Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Harv. Let's continue our lecture on the Renaissance, specifically the Italian Renaissance. So, in the very first lecture, if you remember, I talked about some of the causes to the Italian Renaissance. In the previous lecture, the one right before this, we talked about some of the city-states, kind of the political, social, and economic functions of the city-states, what's going on in those city-states. But in the very first lecture, if y'all remember, we were talking about some of the main themes of the Italian Renaissance. And humanism is a key concept and key theme within the Italian Renaissance. Um, Over this class, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about political history, social history, economic history, art. One of the main kind of notions and parts of this class is intellectual history. And intellectual history, in my opinion, is probably the most important because if people start thinking differently, we're going to see politics, economics, society change. Humanism is where people start to think differently. All right, super important. And humanism will be, if we have a real, full on AP test this year, not just, one DBQ. If we have the full AP exam this year, humanism will be on your AP exam. It is super important. Um, you cannot, you have to know humanism when thinking about the Italian Renaissance. It's one of the most important parts about the Italian Renaissance. Okay. So, humanism, a different way of thinking, okay? It's very much a debated term, and it's a very multifaceted term. Humanism is referring to a different way of thinking. It's intellectual. It's looking at the world in a different way, okay? It's a cultural, intellectual, and educational term. Okay, it's very multifaceted. Faceted. So let's break it down a little bit. Okay, it's a modern way of thinking. This is the birth of a modern Europe, and one of the first, parts of this evolution of Europe in a modern sense is Europeans are going to start thinking differently. Okay, one of the key parts of that is Europeans are going to start thinking more secularly, more about individualism, more about themselves, less on this is less religious thinking, more secular thinking. Really important. Okay, something that's going to be really important within humanism, and I'm going to kind of get ahead of myself a little bit. Is religious reform. We're going to talk about that in the terms of the Northern Renaissance, but a huge part of humanism is this idea of truth. And with the rediscovery of the Greeks and Romans, right, fall of Constantinople, we're seeing a lot of the intellectuals, merchants getting a ton of new literature that's being rediscovered in Europe, right? Euclid, Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, tons of Romans as well. Is they're gonna One of the big ideas of Greek philosophy and a Greek way of thinking is truth. This idea of truth, and we're gonna see in the Northern Renaissance, they're gonna be a lot of Northern Renaissance humanists are gonna be looking for the truth of religion. What are some of the true values of religion? And they're going to go look at ancient Bibles and ancient texts, religious Christian texts, and be looking and looking and looking. And this is going to be super influential for the Protestant Reformation because some humanists like Martin Luther, okay, is going to be reading the Bible, He's going to read the Bible. He's going to read so many different versions of the Bible, and he's going to go, there's no Pope in any of these Bibles mentioned at all. So should we even have a Pope? And that's going to be one of big things within Lutheranism. There is no Pope. Okay? So religious reform, that we're gonna see that. This idea of finding truth. Okay? Another facet of humanism is this idea of civic responsibility, personal liberty, this idea of what makes a good ruler. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Machiavelli. We're going to talk a little bit about Castiglione. What makes an effective ruler? Okay, is it better to be feared rather than loved? What makes a really good ruler? Okay, we're going to be looking at that with Machiavelli and Castiglione. Okay, humanists valued a liberal arts educational program, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But a very balanced education. They wanted people to be good at many different things. A Renaissance man. This idea of being not just good at math, but also good at reading, writing, being balanced. Okay, a balanced education, not just focusing on one specific thing. Okay, and humanism, and this is number 5 is kind of like all this put together. It's something that emphasizes secular new ideas, exploring new interests, thinking for yourself, looking at the world and not looking at it and having someone explain it to you. Like that's how it was before in medieval times. The Catholic Church would explain the world to people and explain to people why the world was the way it was. Okay. Now people are looking at trees going, why does that tree have all these different flowers? And then why does that tree look different from that tree? Why is that bird, have different colors than that bird? Or why is that bird, super, super, colorful and that bird isn't? People are going to be wanting to, you know, look at these things for themselves. And that's where we're going to start to get, science and tons of new ideas, and we're going to see rapid intellectual change because of this way of thinking for yourself. People looking at the stars going, or looking up in the sky going, what is that up there? What are these things? What's going on? Why does the moon do that? Why is the moon over there at one night and then it's all the way over here on another night? What is causing that? People are going to start to think for themselves and look at the world differently. Really important. And they're looking at it through mainly a secular lens. Okay? Very important. Let's talk about some of the characteristics of humanist scholarship and humanist way of thinking. Huge part of the Italian Renaissance, okay, is the classics, studying the Greeks and Romans. This is huge, okay? And they're getting this influence from the fall of Constantinople, okay? They're going to be studying these ancient languages. They're going to be studying ancient Latin, okay? Studying ancient Greek. And they're also going to be rediscovering some of the huge findings and huge achievements of the ancient Greeks and Romans, such as math. They're going to be, and we're going to see that in their art. We're going to see that in their architecture. They're going to rediscover geometry, some algebraic concepps. All right, they're going to be, discovering things like Pythagoras, and that's going to be super, super, super. We're going to be able to see that in their art and architecture. Okay, and a big characteristic was this idea of the liberal arts. Okay, a useful education, being well-rounded. Okay, studying, not just math, but grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, politics, moral philosophy. Being athletic, going out and doing athletic endeavors. And back then, it was like being well versed in like sword fighting or jousting or riding a horse. Okay, so being well-rounded. Okay, and we very much today you all are kind of in almost a humanist educational setting, right? You all just don't take math all day or take, culinary all day. You all are taking, a language class, whether it's Spanish, French, okay? And kind of one thing that bums me out is I wish we offered more languages at the school. It would be super cool. You all take, math, a language, English, science, a history course, physical education, right? You all have a very well balanced educational setting. That's very much a humanist setting, okay? A humanist type of education, okay? This is something also that's super important, ladies and gentlemen, is this idea of studying primary sources instead of received wisdom. We're gonna see humanists, ladies and gentlemen, look at things for themselves. And they're not necessarily gonna have received wisdom, aka having people tell them about certain things. Okay, for example, we're gonna start seeing these scholars, historians looking at ancient texts for themselves, as opposed to having intellectual authorities like the Catholic Church explain history to them, right? And so we're gonna start to see Europeans and intellectuals start to find some discrepancies and be like, this wasn't what? Like this is kind of different than what we were always told. They're starting to think for themselves, look at the world for themselves, as opposed to have someone explain it to them. Okay, and obviously because of that, we're gonna see some differences. Okay, super important is humanists believed in the infinite potential of humans and individuality. So we're seeing people focused on humans, focused on themselves, and people are going to be focused on how the human body works. We're going to see that in science. Focused on how agriculture works. We're going to see that in the agricultural revolution. How the stars work. We're going to see that in astronomy. Why, as opposed to just focusing on God and letting the church explain the world for them. Okay, We're going to see this idea of virtue, the quality of being a great man. Now, I use man specifically because education is different for men and women during this time. And I'm a huge feminist. We're going to talk about the evolution of women's rights. We're going to talk about the evolution of women and women's intellectual history. But during this time, education was mainly reserved for men, wealthy men. Okay? So this idea of being a great man and excelling in all your pursuits, okay? And civic humanism, like I mentioned before, what specific qualities a leader should have, okay? What is a successful leader, and how can a successful leader, create a successful country? Reason, understanding the natural world, understanding the human body, understanding humans. And like I said before, this is a huge key concept within humanistic education is accuracy, truth, being critical analysis, looking at the world and being critical, skeptical. Why is that? What makes the ocean what makes the ocean rise up and then it recedes, and then it rises up and then it recedes? Why is that? Okay, why does that rock look different from that rock? Why is that plant different from that plant? Why certain times of the year does it get really, really cold and it gets really, really hot? What causes that? Okay, that's crazy. Why does it take this plant this long to grow, but then this plant, it's being critical, thinking for yourself, okay? Analyzing things. This is a way different way of thinking, okay? This is humanism, a modern way of thinking, all right? And like I'm kind of foreshadowing where this is going to go, right? Industry is going to come from this. Science is going to come from this. The Enlightenment, major movements are rooted in the Renaissance. Okay? Educationally, right? Humanists were looking for wisdom, okay? Learning, okay? Exploring new ideas. This is really important. Figuring things out, trying new things, okay? And we're going to see that in their art and architecture, okay? You're going to see, humanist artists like our Ninja Turtles, okay? Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, trying these new things, using math in their art. It's going to be insane. Y'all are going to freak out when you see it. Okay, but they're constantly looking for new ideas to solve problems, trying things. Let's try, instead of growing these tomatoes this way, let's try to grow our tomatoes this way. And it's this humanistic type of thinking, okay, that's going to lead to so many advancements that we're going to see. Okay, so super important. All right, civic humanism, and I've touched on this, but I'm going to talk about some of our main civic humanist thinkers. And remember, in my lectures, I want you to be, I'm very detail oriented. I want you to be thinking big topics here, okay? But a big part of the education was public figures. In this class, we're going to talk about the evolution of politics, okay? And we're going to talk about some major thinkers, especially in the Enlightenment, who commented on what makes an effective leader, right? We're in the midst of a presidential election right now, right? We have Donald Trump, he's the incumbent, and then we have Joe Biden. We have leaders in the Republican and Democratic parties. What makes a good leader? All right, is a good leader a really good speaker? Or is a good leader a really good listener? Is a good leader someone who is well traveled, or is a good leader someone who excels at business? What makes a really good leader? And we're looking at some of our civic humanist thinkers start to talk about that. What makes an effective leader? And they believe that education should prepare future leaders. That education, that political leaders need a specific type of education. Okay, here are some of our major civic humanists. Okay, you have Bruni, Brassellini, right? Bruni's the one that I remember. He's really important. But what makes an effective leader? Okay, civic humanists were noted for their emphasis on rhetoric, that effective leaders should be really effective at speaking. And we're going to talk about some really effective leaders who were effective speakers. Okay, so these ideas, right? What makes a really good leader? Okay, let's stop here, ladies and gentlemen, for right now. And in the next lecture, I will kind of emphasize some of our really important humanist thinkers, and we'll finish up humanism. Okay, thank you so much.